Hello.
To still remember how it all started that night. I had a shallow sleep and woke up to a pungent burning smell. At first, I thought it was just smoke from the neighborhood. It happens in Los Angeles. But when I heard a crackling sound and saw the flames on the walls of our bedroom, I realized it was our house. The fire had already engulfed part of the house. I quickly picked up my wife and children. Everything happened very quickly. We managed to take only the most necessary things: documents, a few changes of clothes, some toys for the children. The children were crying. My wife was confused, but we knew that every second was worth its weight in gold. The fire was spreading at a speed that was hard to comprehend. Beams were cracking, windows were breaking, and rooms were filling with smoke one by one. I tried to stay calm, even though panic was gripping every cell in my body. We ran outside, and the cold night air mixed with stinking smoke hit us in the face. Chaos reigned around us. Our neighbors were also leaving their homes in a hurry. Some ran out barefoot, some dragged their pets with them, and some just stood there, stunned by what was happening. When we got to a safe distance, I suddenly heard a scream. It was our neighbor, Mr. Howard. He was in his 70s and lived alone. He was shouting for help from the window of his house, which was already engulfed in flames. I told my wife to stay with the children and rushed to his house. The fire was already reaching the roof, and the smoke made the air heavy and suffocating. I covered my face with my sleeve and kicked in the door. It was hot inside like an oven. I heard him coughing in one of the rooms. Mr. Howard was holding a frame with a picture of his family. He stood in the corner as if paralyzed with fear. I ran up to him, grabbed his arm, and practically dragged him outside. We managed to get out a few seconds before the roof started to collapse. When we were outside, I saw his eyes filled with tears. He was holding the same photo and whispering quietly the names of his family. It was the moment when I realized that loss looks different for everyone. For some it is a home. For others, it is the memory of people who are no longer with them. We stood in front of our homes, watching the flames consume everything. Our home, our belongings, our memories, everything was disappearing in this fiery chaos. The fire was so strong that even the firefighters who arrived later could not stop it. They only tried to contain the flames so that they would not spread to other buildings. The fire seemed to have a will of its own, inexorably destroying everything in its path. My heart was breaking. I saw our children clinging to my wife, their faces pale and frightened. My wife was holding the few things we had managed to grab. Everything we had built over the years was gone in one night. But I knew that the main thing was that we were alive. That was the only thought that kept me afloat at that moment. Later, I started helping other neighbors. One of them tried to pull his car out of the garage, but the door was stuck. Together we lifted the metal frame so he could drive out. Another neighbor was looking for his cat, who was scared and hid under the terrace. We spent a few minutes finding him before the fire reached that part of the house. The fire lasted for several hours, and we could only stand and watch everything burn. Black smoke covered the sky, and even the moon, which used to shine so brightly, became dim. When the fire finally died down, only charred remains remained. Almost nothing could be saved. The ground was hot. Everything around smelled burnt. We stood in silence, surrounded by neighbors who had also lost their homes. This night changed us. I looked at my family and saw fear in their eyes, but also gratitude for being together. We lost a lot, but we didn't lose each other. I didn't know what would happen next, but I realized that we would have to start from scratch. And although it seemed impossible, I was ready to do anything to make my children feel safe again. We had been through hell, but we knew we had to move on. When the first rays of sunlight broke through the smoke and dust, we headed to the city. Our son had started coughing during the night, and I couldn't wait any longer. We gathered what was left of our belongings and got in the car to find a doctor. The road looked like footage from a movie about the end of the world. Burnt trees, the remains of houses, and people wandering around looking for help. We got to the nearest hospital. A temporary first aid station was set up in the parking lot. People stood in lines holding their children in their arms, or just sat on the ground, hoping to be helped. I clutched my son to my chest and approached one of the doctors, explaining that he wouldn't stop coughing. The doctor examined him and said that, fortunately, it was nothing serious, but he needed to rest and keep him away from smoke. As we were waiting for the doctor to write down all the details, a man approached us. He was tall, with thick dark hair and a beard. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, but his eyes gave away something more. He greeted us and asked if we were okay. His voice was quiet but full of sincerity. At first I thought he was one of the volunteers who was helping people. We told him what happened to our house and how we ended up here. He listened attentively, sometimes nodding as if he was trying to imagine every detail of our story. His sympathy was felt even without words. "What do you plan to do next?" he asked after a pause. I shrugged my shoulders. We had lost everything. I had no plan, no idea how to start over. His gaze changed, became more focused. He assured us that there would always be help and advised us not to lose faith. I did not immediately realize who he was. Only when we got back to the car did my wife say quietly, "I think it's Keanu Reeves." I looked at her, thinking she was joking. But when I looked at him again, watching him continue to talk to the other victims, I realized she was right. It really was him. It seemed strange to me that such a famous person was here among us, without cameras or security. But remembering his behavior, I realized that it was sincere. He was just there to help, and it seemed as real as it was incredible. A few hours after our encounter with the man we now recognized as Keanu Reeves, he reappeared at our car. His calm appearance and the confidence in his voice immediately made us feel less confused. He was holding a notebook with notes, and I realized that he was not just sympathizing, he was planning to act. "I thought you might need a place to rest and recuperate," he said, looking directly at us. "I've organized a room for you in a hotel nearby. You can stay there until you decide what to do next." We were stunned. None of us had expected such a gesture. I tried to object, saying that we could not accept such help, but he just smiled and added, "This is the least I can do. Please accept it." Later that day, he drove us to a hotel. It was a small, cozy place, but for us it was a real miracle. The room had 2 beds, warm blankets, clean clothes, and even some food. When we entered, the children started smiling as they explored the new place. Their joy was priceless. Keanu left us his phone number and said we could call him if we needed any more help. His simplicity and sincerity were impressive. He didn't act like a person who was doing it for publicity or recognition. He just wanted to help. The next morning he returned, this time with packages in his hands. It was clothes, toys for the children, warm coats, and some more food. He even brought a notebook for my wife, so she could write down important things to do. "I know you have a lot to rebuild," he said as he handed over the packages. "But the main thing is to take your time. You have time, and you are not alone." His words sounded so simple, but they were full of real support. He helped us not only financially, but also morally. His presence reminded us that even in the darkest of times, there are people who are ready to lend a helping hand. When he left, we stayed in the room, overwhelmed with emotions. I looked at my family and saw in their eyes the hope that seemed to have disappeared that night of the fire. Thanks to Keanu, we were able to see the light in this dark period of our lives. His kindness will stay with us forever. The next morning we woke up in the hotel, and everything seemed a little less scary. Outside the window, we could see the sky almost clear of smoke, and that gave us hope. We had a simple breakfast left by the hotel staff, and for the first time in a long time, our children looked calm. It was a rare moment of peace, but we knew it wouldn't last. Around noon, Keanu arrived at the hotel. He was wearing the same simple t-shirt and jeans, but he brought several bags of food, water, and clothes with him. He left the packages at our room door and said, "This is for you, to make it easier for you to get settled." We invited him to come inside, and he agreed. Keanu sat down at the small table in our room and started talking to our children. He asked them what they liked, what toys they would like to get. His warm tone and attentiveness immediately melted away their shyness, and in a few minutes they were laughing and talking about their favorite games. I couldn't stop watching him create this atmosphere of calm. He hadn't forgotten about my wife and me either. Keanu sat down next to us and quietly asked how we were doing, if we needed anything we hadn't told him before. His questions were simple but precise. He offered to help us get in touch with local organizations that could provide legal support to recover our documents and receive compensation for the loss of our homes. He sat with us for about an hour, talking, joking with the children, and planning how we could handle the situation. After that, he asked us to go outside. He showed us that in the trunk of his car, there were several boxes of things for other affected families. He invited us to join the distribution. We agreed because it seemed the right thing to do. Even in our difficulties, we could help others. We spent several hours in the parking lot of the hotel distributing food and clothes to people who had also lost their homes. It was incredible to see how people support each other even in the most difficult moments. Keanu was at the center of this process. He would go up to everyone, talk to them, find out what they needed, and do whatever he could to help. When the next morning came, I knew it would be a day we would never forget. We woke up earlier than usual and started preparing to meet Keanu. My wife cleaned the room, the kids tried to tidy up their toys, and I just sat there thinking about how to express my gratitude for everything he had done for us. Around noon, he arrived. This time, no bags or boxes, just a smile on his face. He said he just wanted to talk and see how we were feeling after a few days of recovery. We all sat down at the table in our room, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could talk in peace. I started by saying how much his help meant to us. I told him that thanks to him, we were able not only to get a roof over our heads, but also to feel that we were not alone. His support gave us the strength to look to the future with optimism. Every word he said and every action he took was like a ray of light in the darkest of times. My wife also thanked me. She told me how the children started laughing again, how she was able to sleep peacefully for the first time in several days. The children, though a little shy, joined in the conversation. They thanked him for the toys and for spending time with them in the park. I saw Keanu smile slightly when he heard their words. At the end of our meeting, I decided to ask, "Why did you decide to help us?" He thought for a while and then answered, "Because I believe that the most important thing in life is to support each other. We can all find ourselves in a situation where we need help. And if I have the opportunity, I want to be the person who will support you." His words stayed with me. They were simple, but incredibly profound at the same time. We said goodbye, and he said he would always be in touch if we needed anything. When he left, I felt that our gratitude was not only words, but also an obligation. We have to pass this kindness on. That day was the end of one stage of our lives and the beginning of a new one. We decided that we would work on rebuilding our house, but also on supporting other people, as Keanu did for us. His kindness and humanity have become an example that we will always carry with us. This story is not only about how we survived the fire, but also about how one person can make a difference in the lives of others.
Goodbye.